You're watching Let the Quran Speak. We recently had a chance to watch a talk by Leslie Hazelton called The Doubt Essential to Faith. Hazelton wrote a biography of the Prophet Muhammad. She expressed surprise that when the Prophet first received revelations, his initial reaction was doubt and confusion. And yet this experience led to the development of a belief system that thrives to this day. Did the Prophet Muhammad really doubt himself? And can doubt and questioning be considered essential to faith? With me to discuss this topic, Dr. Shabir Ali from the Islamic Information Center. Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on the show.
So you've watched the talk yourself. You've seen what she has to say about the Prophet Muhammad. Is what she said the case? Is that actually the case that the Prophet Muhammad was fearful, worried, confused after receiving the revelation? How did he respond?
It is indeed mentioned in some of the early materials regarding the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that when he first received this visitation from the angel Gabriel and he was told to recite what would become the first piece of revelation given to him and then would be collected as part of the Quran later on, he left with some anxiety as to how to understand this experience. Now, that sort of anxiety is not unique to the Prophet's own experience. We see often in the Bible that famous figures are given epiphanies of God, and they react with some sort of fear. Now, in the case of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it was more than just fear. It was more so like misgiving or doubt as to what exactly happened to him. And
so Hazelton was saying that maybe he thought he might have been hallucinating, or maybe that he was possessed by a jinn. Is that the case?
Obviously, he had to interpret this experience in the light of the common experiences that were known from his environment. And had he been an avid reader of the Bible, he might have interpreted his experience in terms of divine revelation, that God sends messages to the prophets and he is now a prophet. But he thought of poets in the Arabian environment, and he had actually despised poets. So he had to ask himself, am I now becoming a poet? Because it looks like this material, which was somehow inspired into his mind, comes out like in verse. So is he becoming something that he himself does not like? And another category in which he could have interpreted this was the category of jinn possession. We know of the exorcist traditions that survive in some cultures and religions, where a person is believed to be possessed by an evil spirit, and then that evil spirit speaks through the person. He began to ask himself, am I possessed by some evil spirit that is doing something here that is not me, reciting this content that is not really my own? And this too, for him, was terrible even to contemplate, and to think that he might be a jinn-possessed person who might then in turn begin to mislead his own people, and began to be too much for him to bear.
So Hazelton says that he was driven almost to the point of suicide. What do you think of that idea?
Some of the reports say that in fact he thought about going up on a high mountain and throwing himself to his death. But when he would ascend the mountain and he would look in the horizon, he would see a figure, a very pure being, and that filled the horizon. And this being spoke to him and said, I am Gabriel, and you are a messenger of God. And he tried to avert his glance from this being, but he said, wherever I turned in any direction, I would see the same being there filling the horizon.
So how did he overcome that doubt, Brother Shabir?
Well, as he contemplated the words of this angelic being who spoke to him, and he went back to his home, he also spoke to his wife Khadija about this, and she linked him with one of her relatives who had some knowledge of the Torah and the Gospel, and who used to write the Gospel as well, it is noted, or translated into Arabic. The reports are varied about this. When he heard about the Prophet Muhammad's experience, he said that you were actually visited by the great lawgiver, and the same one who used to come to Moses. So the idea that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was actually now a prophet similar to Moses gradually came to register in the Prophet's mind. Over time, of course, he would receive more and more of these revelations, more visitations from the angel Gabriel, more of the Quran to recite. And eventually he himself will come to see that these are good moral teachings that are being revealed to him, of teachings of great benefit to his people. And he overcame that initial doubt.
So how long did that process take then?
The reports do not show like what is the conclusion to this. The reports just say that this was the initial doubt that he had, and then things went on from there. But we can safely say that over the next couple of years, as the revelations came to him time after time, that he eventually forgot that initial experience, or the doubt that he experienced on that initial moment, and he confidently began to proclaim the message of God. In fact, the Quran then said to him that he should proclaim the message in public.
Now, there were also circumstances in the Prophet's life in which he felt despair, he felt confusion, he felt doubt about what he was doing and about whether he could achieve what he had set out to achieve. And the Quran addresses that as well and tells him, do not despair. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a human being. And naturally, as a human being, he would have all of the ups and downs of life as other human beings have. And the Quran recognizes this. In fact, the Quran, as is already clear to our viewers, has been revealed in pieces over time. Now, the Quran gives its own rationale for this piecemeal and partial revelation given over time. And one of the reasons for this, the Quran says, is so that God could strengthen the heart of the Prophet. And that would mean that over time, as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, needed more assurance from God, especially in the face of objection and opposition from his enemies, that he is actually on the right track. So the Quran would continue to assure the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, speak to him and tell him that you are indeed the messenger of God. This is the truth being revealed to you from God. So do not doubt, do not waver, and just continue and persist in delivering the messages that you are receiving from God.
Now, when Leslie Hazelton gave this talk, she said that doubt is essential to faith. That real faith requires questioning, requires constantly rethinking. So she thought doubt was a good thing. But it seems like amongst Muslims, there's this reluctance to discuss doubt. That there's the sense that one should always be certain about one's faith. Can you comment on that?
This reluctance may be due in part to a verse in the Quran, which is in the 49th chapter, which says that the believers are only those who believe in God and His Messenger, and moreover do not doubt. So the idea of not doubting here seems to be essential to the Muslim faith. Muslims also speak of faith as involving yaqeen, or certitude, and so doubt would seem to be contrary to this. But I do believe that Hazelton has a point here in that the person who does not doubt actually is not apparently thinking, because there is a certain healthy degree of doubt, and then there is that sort of compelling doubt that causes one to waver in one's commitment to the faith. Now, a Muslim may have been committed to the faith for, let's say, 30 years throughout one's, as far as one can remember, or as long as one can remember. But during those years, one could have moments of questioning certain things. An idea could arise, and one would say, "Yeah, how about that?" And that could be an initial moment of doubt that sends one into a research, or propel one to do some research to find the answer to a certain question. And all of this is healthy. In fact,
Yes, because if you don't do that, then you end up having blind faith, right? You end up having a faith that isn't really backed up with anything solid.
that's right. So what we notice among Muslim scholars in our history is that some of the greatest Muslim scholars have rethought many of their positions. It is noted that Imam Shafi, may God have mercy on him, had two sets of opinions, one when he was in Baghdad and the other when he moved to Egypt. So we see that the circumstances in which he was actually shaped many of his opinions. So one's experiences in life causes one to think new thoughts. And a doubt actually is the origin of investigation that leads to research, to study, and the formulation of new opinions and new ideas.
Very quickly, sometimes people, sometimes Muslims who experience doubt are afraid of voicing those doubts because they fear that they will be ostracized. What would you say to those individuals? How can we support those individuals?
Well, Imam al-Ghazali in his Book of Knowledge, part of the Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences, said that if one has a doubt, it is essential to find the answer to remove that doubt. And so he recognizes that doubt will inevitably afflict individuals, and it is essential to find the knowledge to remove that doubt. Muslims need to have an open atmosphere in which it is possible for people to express their doubts so that the Muslim scholars could address those doubts using reason and evidence and proof so that the doubts could be removed once and for all.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we will answer questions we received from you, our viewers.